Good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon, Preston, and good afternoon, all the online watchers. I hope that with this session, we will inspire you into thinking new opportunities and possibilities on the theme of embedding sustainability into journalism. So what we will do now is we will further dive into the topic and further explore some of the key trends in sustainability and climate conscious journalism and AI. We will also look at what it means and what can we do to reach climate conscious audiences, in particular also youth audiences. So let me start with introducing Jackie Marrington. Jackie is the Deputy Commercial Editorial Director at Mail Metro Media. But very importantly, Jackie is also the Sustainable Strategy Lead at Mail Metro Media and very importantly, an alumna of the Journalism, Innovation and Leadership program where you are. So she's focused on embedding sustainable practices into media organizations. Then I am so delighted to also introduce to you Ibrahim Khalilulali Huisman, all the way from South Africa. Welcome, Ibrahim. I have a huge respect for Ibrahim because he recently started and founded the organization, the startup organization Ecomedia Africa. And he is also an alumnus of the Journalism, Innovation and Leadership program. Then, last but certainly not least, Laurens Vreekamp, who is with you in Preston right now, but he normally is, I think, closer to where I live in the Netherlands. And Laurens is the founder of the Future Journalism Today Academy. He is also a distinguished design thinker and AI expert and has written at least one book, and I think you're working on a second book, if I'm not wrong. And he is a visiting faculty member of the JIL program since 2022. I've been working for over 20 years indeed in the area of sustainability and working with businesses to embed sustainability in their operations, in their brands. Also feeling and the pressure of, on the one hand, wanting to communicate about it, but also wanting to do it in a way that stays true to what the business is actually doing, not greenwashing, but also making sure that by using the voice of business to attract more businesses on the journey and bring in a little bit of competition to bring more businesses along the journey of moving towards a more sustainable world. So that brings me to the first question, in fact, because indeed I was mentioning embedding sustainability. And I would like to start with Jackie, and I would like to hear all three panelists, in fact. How can we embed sustainability and climate thinking in the work we're all doing in our respective areas? So perhaps, Jackie, can I ask you to give your views on this?
Yes, of course. Thanks ever so much, Truus, and thanks for that introduction. As you say, inspiring speakers already today. So for me, it's about understanding where you're starting from. So, and that requires you to look at three things: where you're at as an individual, where your business is at, and who's your audience, and what's going to motivate them. So for me, my starting point is as an individual. I'm someone who came into journalism because I want to save the world, and I think this is an incredibly important issue for us all to look at. I'm someone who is definitely on a learning journey when it comes to understanding about the climate crisis and sustainability and all that's involved there. And as Francois said, we recently undertook a carbon literacy program with Sarah. But there's always more to learn. I'm always learning. I certainly learned through that my own carbon footprint is too big. So that's something that I need to address myself. I've been a journalist for around 20 years, but I've recently moved into the commercial team at Mail Metro Media on a role that really bridges commercial and editorial. It's about editorial integration in commercial. And so I guess the scope of what I can do is more based around what I can do in advertising at the moment. But my outlook is as someone who wants to have a positive impact. I'm not someone who's approaching this as a from the standpoint of wanting to just mitigate risk. I want to have a positive impact. And then secondly, looking at where your business is at. So that's kind of really useful context to understand where your company is at on its carbon journey. What are its goals? What are its key KPIs? How is sustainability going to support its overall ambitions as a company and not detract from them? For me, working at DMGT, Daily Mail Group, we are on a journey of decarbonisation. We've gone quite a long way, but we've got a way to go. And there are different approaches from different parts of the business. So we've got the Daily Mail, we've got the newspaper, and we've got New Scientist, which is a very different values and mission perhaps to the Daily Mail. And then thirdly, your audience. So Mail Metro Media did a piece of research at the start of this year called Shades of Green, and it looked at the different levels of engagement with climate among audiences. 78% of people in that research said climate change was important to them, but only 4% said it was their primary concern. And with that in mind, you have to think about how you would reach those people, not just at the kind of very engaged climate conscious end of the audience spectrum, but also those who don't see it as a priority, but we need to get them thinking about climate as well, or at least thinking about sustainable behaviors. So for me, I take those three things and I ask, how can I make the biggest difference in a way that's authentic to me, meets the business objectives, but also resonates with audiences as well.
Thank you so much, Jackie. And Ibrahim, maybe you want to build on that and explain a little bit about your journey, of where you came from and how you came to found your paper or your media.
All right, thank you very much. So first of all, I would like to give a bit of background on where the world is at the moment. So the world is facing three critical issues, which we call the planetary crisis. You have climate change, you have air pollution, you have biodiversity. And in Ghana, where I'm from, you have about 2 million of the population on the brink of losing their livelihood and their property because they live along the coastal areas. So with the rising sea levels, it means that we will continue to see yearly more people losing their property. Towards the northern part of the country, you have farmers facing dry spell, to some extent drought. And towards the southern, you have the rain pattern changing. We don't have, what we used to know, raining season, sunny season. It just any other day, it can rain in the morning, in the afternoon, it's sunny. So this is what's really, reinvert my thinking as to what exactly is happening, and then what exactly is this idol called climate change. So that was my first step towards researching about climate change and then trying to understand this subject. And I was really glad to have contact with local experts who could explain the situation to me. So I began being critical about what I do and then how I see this situation. So me being able to understand, I'm just one single person. There is a research conducted by the Afro Barometer in Ghana, which says about 50% of the Ghanaian population does not even have an understanding of what climate change is or what exactly are these crises we are facing. So there is a need for us to educate the ordinary Ghanaians who are not scientific, who don't have science background on this subject. So that is the reason why we began Eco Media Africa. The mission and vision is simple: to simplify environmental climate narrative to the ordinary Ghanaian in the very simplest way you can ever imagine. So if you look at the stories on our sites, they are in the simplest ways you could ever imagine. So I believe that when people begin to think critical about this situation, they begin to feel part of the solution. But the very moment people don't feel part of the solution, then they will just think that the problem is not their problem. Yeah. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you for explaining this so clearly and so compellingly. Going to Lawrence, maybe you want to give your perspective too.
Yes, thank you, Truus, and thank you, Ibrahim and Jackie. Yeah, well, I think one of the important things to say is when it comes to being climate conscious and thinking about climate conscious audiences, we can say no to AI. And may sound weird coming from me, but especially for the ones that are thinking about saying no to AI, I've put on this sweater and I will show you. And it's my anti-AI sweater. It's built, designed by Italian fashion agency. And if you wear this sweater and you are being picked up by a surveillance camera, which we call smart cameras, they don't see me, but they think I'm a dog. Just look at this. You might see some snouts and stuff like that. So this sweater represents one of the things we can do to say no to AI. And I think it's not AI is no natural phenomenon that we cannot escape from. Like climate change, we can do something about the way we want to use AI, but we can also decide to not use it on many occasions. It might not be the best solution or not the best technical tool to use. For one thing, obviously, as many people are aware, it takes up a lot of energy to train models, to scrape the web for data, to cool these data server farms and data centers. I think there was a new report that came out yesterday by the Nature Computer Science, and said that generative AI could add up to 5 million metric tons of e-waste in total by 2030. It's a relatively small fraction, they say, of over 60 million metric tons of e-waste, but still it's significant. And we are using this generative AI tools now for everything, but we should not, I would say.
Yeah, I love it to start thinking about the purpose of AI, where it can bring real added value to humanity, but also being conscious about what actually the impact is of when we use the tool. Thank you for starting the discussion, and maybe I can ask you a follow-up question. So what would that mean in a newsroom setting? What would your thoughts, how would a newsroom be able to practically deal with that question?
If and how to use AI and when not to,
Yeah.
you mean? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there are a couple of things, because a lot of people now say, or maybe what marketing gurus might tell you, is that we can get it can be very efficient to use AI and automation tools, right? It can save time with say transcription, summarization, translation, all these repetitive routine tasks. And I think that might be half true, because we know what management will do. If you can make 4 items in the time that it used to be to take 8, they probably ask you to do more. But I think the audience will not be served if we automate all our tasks away and can churn out more quantitative on a quantitative level. So what I think is interesting is if the time we save or reclaim by using automation better be spent on the most human elements of our work, that's interacting with real people, listening, and do true understanding, coming up with creative ways to follow up on that. And I would like to connect this with the point that inspired me by what Sarah Hartley said about green shifting. And I thought, well, as journalists, we might be guilty of news shifting, like the equivalent of green shifting, because we are shifting the blame of the sort of journalism in decline away from ourselves, and we call our audience news avoiders or conspiracy theorists, or all of these things. But we can't keep up blaming the audience. We should look to ourselves. And with that, maybe in a bit of a twist, we can use AI to uncover our human biases, to uncover our blind spots, and to help us focus on the things that the audience might need. I hope this answers your question, Truus.
Really, really well articulated. And that brings me, and it makes me think of a point that made at a conference here in Brussels a few weeks ago. On the use of AI also to detect mis and disinformation. Of course, it's also often associated with fake news and deep fake, etc. But of course, if we use it properly, we can really turn it into a very powerful tool to discover fake or disinformation and misinformation, and help us. And I think you have some thoughts around that as well, to get to know our audiences better, right? There are new models out, and maybe before I turn back to Ibrahim for a follow-up question on how to connect with audiences around climate journalism, but maybe you want to finish this point around the use of AI to really get to know our audiences better and connect better and engage these audiences better.
Yeah, I just came across one use case last week in the Netherlands. A journalist from a legacy newspaper. He told me that they, like most newsrooms nowadays, they use some form of the user needs model. I think it was first developed at the BBC with Dimitri Shishkin, and now Smart Octo has this tool. They've, I don't know who built it for them, but they've got some user needs AI assistant. So if they write an article, they put it in Google Docs, they have an extension which tells them you're catering to this specific user needs. This is how you can rewrite instead of inform me or update me, to engage me or connect with me or all the other needs. So it reads the article, thinks about your audience, it gives you advice on how to rewrite and what kind of user needs it could address as well. And I think that's very interesting, because then it really facilitates, it's an assistant to help you connect with your audience. So that was one of the most recent interesting use cases I saw of using AI to connect with your audience.
And Ibrahim, you explained really well how you connect and how you want to connect your audiences in Ghana, and how climate change, and it always makes me actually feel very angry when you explain how much people in Ghana and I think in other countries in Africa as well are already impacted by climate change, whereas in fact you have contributed to the least to it, right? So there's a huge injustice there, and so maybe you can share with us a little bit more about how that works. How do you get a sense that you bring along your audiences on this journey in a fair way, and also in a way where, indeed, we talked about it earlier, people get a sense of agency around and a sense of urgency at the same time?
All right, thank you very much. So we need to understand that trust is very important. And then as a media organization, one of the things we are keen on is the type of content we churn out. So we have three types of audience. First, people who are learned and people who already know about climate change. And secondly, you have people who just don't believe. I mean, right? I mean, they just have this conviction that whatever is happening is just happening. It's natural. So they just don't believe. And then we have the third type of audience, who are people who have heard about this climate crisis and they want to learn more. So in all, you have to make sure your content targets all these types of audiences you have. So what we did that I think is helping us is we promote an environment where people can have a conversation on a news report. So we have different WhatsApp platforms where when we publish the stories, we share the links, and then you have people having conversation on the topic. So everyone is allowed to share their opinion freely in a way where we can all learn. And then through this, I've had people who don't believe in the climate crisis telling me that, Khalil, we think now we are beginning to align with you. not completely though, but we are having a change of mindset on this issue. So I believe that trust is very important, and then creating a community where people can interact. It depends on your location. For someone maybe who is in Europe, maybe the comment section, people can feel free to comment. But in our own context, not everyone will really feel okay to comment publicly, because it might kind of like create this kind of banter and insult and everything. So having that kind of platform helps people to share their opinion on this issue. Yeah.
Yeah, and Jackie, turning back to you, what is your experience having worked in the UK in important news media? How can we best reach perhaps climate conscious audiences, or perhaps and particularly youth audiences?
Yeah, so I, as you say, I've worked in several newsrooms across the UK. I worked for Reach and worked across a lot of their regional newsrooms, and I think climate is a challenging subject for journalists. It's not a single news event, and news is very much event driven. It's a systemic issue. It's complex. It's woven into all sorts of different areas, as we've already said in this in these discussions today. It crosses across science, sports, politics, healthcare, every aspect of journalism. And it's not always easy to reach audiences, but it's incredibly important that we do, and probably more important than any other issue, that we find a way to reach those audiences. I think there are three reasons why newsrooms really need to kind of find a way to get through to audiences around climate. Number one, we know that younger audiences are perceived to be more climate conscious, and even if the kind of where there's research on this, it's shown that younger audiences might not differ wildly from older audiences in terms of their understanding of climate change. They certainly have a more emotional response to it, and I think with those emotional responses often comes a really good way to get across to audiences. Secondly, again, it's been said already today, but news avoidance is on the increase. Trust in media is declining, and lots of studies have shown this. The Reuters Institute, in numerous of their studies, have shown this is an issue. There's fake news on climate. It's rife on social media. And cutting through this to deliver engaging, trusted climate information, holding those in power to account over the climate, I think will support trust levels for news organisations, and is really important. And thirdly, I think, as you mentioned earlier, there's a business case for it. So businesses that are seen as more sustainable often have a better reputation with consumers. They satisfy consumer demands for more sustainable products. And either through regulation or through choice, I think that the direction of travel is that businesses will want to work with other businesses that are more sustainable, that are thinking about this, that are demonstrating ways in which they're becoming less impactful, and are thinking about the climate and sustainable practices. And so that, I think that will become a really important part of journalism and the ecosystem as a whole as we go forward.
And Jackie, do you already see some good examples, some good practices evolving, which in a way starts serving as perhaps even a kind of a model?
Yeah, I actually want to pull out one particular example from this. I think climate journalism is at its best when it's audience focused, when it's explaining things really clearly, when it's science-based and factual. And when it provides people with, if not solutions, then that feeling of agency that Ibrahim described earlier, that feeling that they can, there is action that they can take. earlier this year, I was on the judging panel for the Solutions Journalism Network Awards, and had the pleasure of reviewing a whole bunch of articles around solutions journalism. And one really stood out to me, and it was a piece of journalism that was on the New York Amsterdam News, and it was in the kind of micro journalism category. But what I loved about it was, so the article was titled "Beyond the Barrel of the Gun: The Heat is Killing Us. Climate Change and Rising Temperatures Are Increasing Gun Violence," and it was by a journalist called Helena Salamon. And what was brilliant is that it brought to life a really big issue in the United States with a surprising link to climate change, and that was the correlation between rising temperatures and gun violence. And it used data and insights to make the link. It presented it all really visually in graphs and charts. It had a human element too, and it brought different people and voices into the piece of writing. And it focused around the evidence and the issues, but it didn't just focus on those evidence and issues. It then moved the story on and moved it towards solutions. And I just thought that really, in one article, and I can share the link in the chat and with people afterwards, but I thought it really brought to life the kind of different elements of what's needed for a really successful piece of journalism that works for climate. And of course, it was an incredibly in-depth piece. It would have taken a very long time to put together, but I think bringing those elements into all climate writing, the context, the science, the action that you can take on the back of it, the audience focus, and the ways in which you can engage audiences, I think is really important.
Yeah, I would love to read that article. Thank you, Jackie. Talking about solutions journalism, I cannot do otherwise than turn back to Ibrahim, because having worked for a foundation before joining the media studio, I've seen some amazing solutions developed by local communities in particularly Africa, and a bit similar to what Boris was explaining earlier. We brought some of those solutions to the COPs as being really grassroots driven and owned by the local communities. And I always found them so inspiring. And when we would share them, we would see always amazing reactions. Is that something you get as a perception, or is that your reality as well, Ibrahim, when you are working with this kind of solutions in Africa?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at in the African continent, there are thousands of solutions, local solutions created by young people and local people to address a bit or part of the climate crisis. We have a friend of mine called Matthias. So in southern Ghana, we have women farmers having a problem with storage. So the solution they came up with was to build a solar house using local resources, which helped these farmers to be able to store their produce. And we have the team at AgriConnect creating a digital game on climate change called the Planet Saver. And we have young people, we have Zico turning waste into charcoal, because most often in this part of the world, people, I mean, not everyone can really afford gas or electric stove and everything. So the majority of the people use charcoal. So they cut down trees, causing deforestation and everything. So we have people using waste to create charcoal. So these are stories that inspire a lot of people, but unfortunately, not all the media organization or the media are not really focusing on this type of solution. Because one thing I've come to realize is the more you write about these solutions, the more people can relate. And the more people kind of feel like, okay, so there is something we can do within our local means. The last time we did a story about a young lady who is turning cocoa waste. So in Ghana, we have a lot of cocoa. So the waste, she's turning it into cosmetics. And then we have people who are also using the same waste to produce fertilizer. So there are innovative local solutions happening here and across parts of Africa. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for giving some of those examples, and it makes it really real, and it's so deeply grounded in and down to earth as well. So thank you for that comment. I'd like to turn to the final question to all of you, in fact, and that's a question around the innovations, potential and need for newsrooms. Where do you see the biggest opportunity, in fact, for newsrooms to innovate in this in the area of climate conscious sustainability journalism, with potentially linked to technology? And Lawrence, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with you if I can invite you to share your thoughts.
Yes, of course. And what I'd like to mention first, as Irim just told us, it's I think all the innovative ways you've just described are testimony, and true testimony, that you don't need AI to be innovative, right? To think innovative or to act innovative. So again, to state my point, we don't need to use AI for everything. But with that, and also regarding the emotional responses as something that works, as Jackie was just saying, I like to point everyone to the work of the Associate Professor of Socially Intelligent AI at the University of Amsterdam, Senay Gebriab. He uses AI as a mirror metaphor. He uses this metaphor and he says, because there's bias in our systems, and this bias exists because we humans have biases. They exist in the real world, and the data is a reflection of that. AI is trained on that. So it helps us reflect, and in a way also reflect on how we work, how we look at climate change. So it shows a reflection of society. But the next step, it has 3 steps, according to Professor Gabriel. He says the next step is it demands introspection. What should we do? What can we do? Do we want to have the status quo, or do we need to change? And then that triggers transformation. And I think Ibrahim just told us that this transformation can come by showing us something that things need to be different. You can use AI, but you don't need to do that. And I think it also connects with the work that Boris van der Wetering was showing as one of the first speakers. I happened to be in the privileged position to see the project in Amman last December, and it's a wonderful, really original piece of storytelling. And I think what he does, he uses art and storytelling to transform. And I think so if we as journalists use this mirror metaphor as what does the things that we do reflect, and did we forget anything? Do we have blind spots? Do we not tell the stories of underrepresented minorities perspectives? And we should. And what's the transformation we want? So I would like to end with that.
Thank you. And Jackie, the same question to you.
Yeah, thank you. So I think I mean, I talked about youth audiences earlier, and I think there is big opportunity to innovate in that space, looking at how we engage younger audiences in climate journalism and try different things. I also think there's a great opportunity for collaboration in this space, because it's an issue that affects absolutely everyone in the world, and therefore every media organisation is grappling with it. Every media organisation will have to deal with it, and finding ways in which we can work together around this issue, I think, is really important, and feeds into, I guess, the work that Francois is bringing us together on this course as well. And then in my space at the moment, I'm looking a lot at revenue generation and advertiser focused initiatives, and how can we engage advertisers in this space and work with other businesses on ideas that are likely to work for revenue generation, but also support those businesses that are really are driving sustainable behavior change. You know, we've got in a lot of our media organizations, we've got a massive audience and with that audience comes power and responsibility and opportunity to reach them and change behaviours. And so one of the things that I'm working on at the moment is a pilot project with AdNet Zero, which is called Every Brief Counts, and it's looking at what we can do to look at sustainability within every single advertising brief that comes in. How can we either explicitly or implicitly weave positive behaviours into those into the messages that we're putting out into the world?
Makes me really curious to hear more about that pilot. That sounds really, really transformative in itself. But Ibrahim, perhaps you can provide some closing reflections as well.
Okay, thank you very much. For us at Eco Media Africa, what we are trying to do is to collaborate more, because I believe as journalists, we are not climate experts. We are just journalists. So our job is to report, and then we should do that accurately. So we are not claiming to be climate experts. However, what we are trying to do is to simplify this issue. So we have begun collaborating with experts, because we realize there is this gap where you have tons of research around these issues, and then no one is even knowing about them. So we've begun simplifying some of these research into news items, and then we hope that with time we are able to do more of this, because I believe we need to share knowledge from the the experts to the people. And then there's also something we called art and climate change. So in our own context, we are looking at using different aspects of storytelling, which include poetry, craft, and everything, to communicate the urgency of climate change. Here in Ghana, we have artists who have already specialized in creating artwork to communicate climate change. So we are exploring these collaborations we've begun, and then we hope with time we can only get better. Thank you.
Yeah, and this shows all these wonderful examples and comments show how important the initiatives that Francois in the Media Studio have started with the Sustainable Innovation Leadership Program. It's so important that we learn and connect those really great practices and see how they further develop, because as Jackie said, you all said, we are at a critical moment in time, and experts say that we are in the critical decade for us before we move into some irreversible impacts of climate change, and linked to some of the other planetary boundaries. We often talk about climate change, but as Maria often says, it's broader than only climate change. Of course, it's linked with biodiversity. I think climate change is often kind of like the symbol of it, but it's so important that we use everything we have in our resources and understand to really move faster with greater sense of urgency to reach the audiences we need to reach. I just want to thank the panel members for their amazing contributions, giving us different perspectives, ways forward, suggestions, inspiring examples, how we can start transforming this space through greater collaboration, looking at indeed some of the really good solutions that are already existing. And it gave me personally a lot of hope that with and without technology as AI, we can make some really great strides forward in this area. And I only look forward to continuing this conversation and hope to develop this network between such important practitioners and you guys in the room to move to even more important levels of climate journalism and reaching more audiences in this respect. And with that, I'd love to turn back to you, Francois, to what I believe are the closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Truus. Whatever else we learned this afternoon, it's clear the climate lens, the planetary issues, not just the climate change, the environmental change, the air pollution issues, are critical. And the media have an important role to play. in this. So while there is already a lot of amazing work going on, there is still a lot of work needed. I think in the first instance, it's clear that within our sector, we first have to own up that we have a role to play. It's the very first thing, and not everybody is there yet, that we have to. I think the next thing we have to do is step up. There is some levels of resource maybe put into this issue or thinking about it, but there's a whole lot more that needs to be done. I think we also need to educate ourselves and to become much more aware of the issues. Sarah's panel or presentation this afternoon, I think just highlighted again and underlined how important it is for us to be personally educated on the topic. But then I also think what is really important, that I'm going to invite our last feedback from, it is to open up. We have to open up our minds to new ways of engaging people around us, new ways of storytelling, new ways of understanding these complex issues in a way that is simple, as Ibrahim has underlined, that engages people in the on a complex issue in a very simple way. And that's certainly the challenge that we have set with people here in the room. But we've also recognized that to open up and be more creative, we need to engage more with people who are engaged in creative practice. So today I've invited 3 artists from our Masters in Fine Arts program to sit into this conversation, and they've been making art about this conversation. And so I'm going to just invite you to come up and maybe share your work. Thank you so much for those reflections.